repressed emotions can cause so much trouble in your life in terms of illness and so much trauma for years to come. And that's why today we're discussing why repressed emotions cause illness and generation trauma and how to fix it in today's episode with Angela Legh. And what's so special about Angela is that she's an author, journalist, producer, transformational storyteller, known for her children's fantasy book series, the Bella Santini Chronicles, and as the writer, director, and producer of the television show Children's Lives Matter. And she's a syndicated columnist for the Los Angeles Tribune as well. The first question I have is, what's the secret to your success? And does learning how to master your emotions have anything to do with that?
Welcome to Awakened Titans podcast with Lily Patrascu. Mind-blowing conversations with influential business titans sharing how you can manifest abundance, love, joy, success through quantum awakening, quantum manifestation, quantum healing, quantum miracles, exponential business growth, and innovative products and services.
Everything. Yeah. I would say that the secret to my success is being authentically me and not trying to be anyone else or trying to follow anyone else's examples. I am very soul aligned, and actually I feel like I really speak from my soul and write from my soul. It's not really channeled. It's just that it's coming from my soul. And I think when you are working for humanity and you're coming in from your heart and soul, you can't help but be successful.
Thank you. How did you figure out that repressed emotions are a big cause of illness, generational trauma, physical and mental stress?
Yeah. So repressed emotions, and this is really important for people in the UK because, keep a stiff upper lip and keep calm, carry on. These are all messages of, hey, those feelings you have, don't feel them. And so it's repressed emotions are something that we learn from our parents. Our parents never learned how to positively deal with emotions. So they ended up showing us grabbing a beer or a drink at the bar, the pub. They showed us going shopping so that I can feel better. They showed us all these different ways to repress emotions, but they never showed us how to deal with them. And so I learned all of this, one, through reading the work of Terry Miller, Dr. Miller wrote a book called The Body Never Lies, as well as another book called The Drama of the Gifted Child. And in each book, she tracked children who were traumatized and showed how those repressed emotions either go inward and you get ill, your body attacks itself, or you express them outward and you attack others. So when you think of the people who are easily offended in your life, there's probably repressed emotions driving that behavior.
Thank you. So tell us, how did you kind of figure out that this is a big problem for people? And why is it important for you to kind of like find a solution for this problem? And how did you come up with this solution for this problem?
Oh, that's a big question. So let's start with the why it's important to me. I have, through my connection to my soul, I have come to the realization that repressed emotions are behind almost every negative behavior in our society. And so by teaching people the tools to face emotions, we can do away with all of that. And in America, school shooting is, kind of a big deal. we can teach our children compassion. We can teach our children how to deal with emotions. And between those two things, we've solved the problem.
Thank you. So tell us what entrepreneurs can do in order to release some trapped emotions. And the reason I ask is that this is very relevant to me because, for example, for the last 10 years, I had sore throat and cough, and I do have some sort of emotional cause to it, and I have no idea how to release it. I've been trying to heal with everything, and nothing has worked. So tell us, what steps should entrepreneurs take in order to start healing their repressed emotions?
So there's two different tools that I teach that would help in this situation. One, if you can remember when you first started coughing, when you first started having the sore throat, and try and remember, was there a triggering incident that caused it? If you can drill it down to that, then you picture that situation in your mind, and you're seeing yourself as the victim of whatever's happening, but the adult you steps into the picture, and the adult you tells the other you, I'm imagining this started in childhood because it might have, and so picks up the child you and tells the truth of the situation, because we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. And that applies to the people who criticized us. It applies to the people who called us names and did things to us. They were seeing the world through their warped filters and perceptions, but they wanted you to see the world the same way, but you don't have to. So by telling the truth, and how I can illustrate this is my very alcoholic and raging father telling me when I'm 3 years old that I'm not worth dirt. And me as an adult stepping into that picture and saying, look, little girl, there's this drunk guy yelling at you. He's just projecting his internal pain onto you. It's not about you. And that can start shifting those feelings and shift the way you look at this situation. And the other tool is what I call focused attention on a feeling. When you have a feeling, I don't call feelings negative or positive because they're just energy. But when you have a feeling and you don't really want to feel it, let's say it's a negative feeling. And so if you say, okay, I'm feeling angry, where am I feeling it? What color is that feeling? How large is that feeling? And you just start describing it to yourself. That's naming the emotion. Next, you feel it. You say, okay, I'm feeling angry. And then you give yourself permission to feel it. What I've learned is that the biology of an emotion as it moves through your body is 90 to 120 seconds. But our minds get in a loop about what happened. And every time we think about what happens, the feeling rises. So by keeping our mind focused on the emotion, we're shutting off that focus on the circumstance, and it allows the emotion to flow.
Thank you. So every time I organize a large event, I find that I'm always losing power, almost like an internal self-sabotage. So like I still deliver, but let's say if I have 200 or 600 entrepreneurs or even 50, like I find that it's almost like I'm getting choked up. Like I'm getting physically ill, I'm getting headaches or migraines or a cough. So it becomes really difficult to operate because it's almost like an internal thing that happens every time I have some opportunity for exposure. And the really sad thing about that is that I get hundreds of opportunities for media exposure and for speaking around the world. So a lot of times, I either deliver and I really struggle and I try my best to hide it, or I just kind of go there and sometimes I can't go because I just cannot physically make it because I'm not well. So I wonder, is there anything that you suggest in terms of releasing repressed emotions that seem to kind of make themselves known more exactly at the time when you're supposed to be like this champion of the world in your specific field?
Yeah.
It kind of like shows up and it kind of ensures that you kind of kill yourself from the inside, kind of thing.
So, do you ever run energy through your chakras? Because your throat chakra is probably where the stuck energy is, and that would be coughing and sore throats, etc. So, one of the practices that I do with energy is to now this is very spiritual. So I will call on the first ray of creation, which is the ray of God, and call it into my heart. And then I rise that energy up into my throat chakra, up into my third eye, through my crown, and up through the ninth chakra, and then back down through my body. And then I'm aligned with the will of God. And spinning that chakra can help dissipate the energy. So all you have to do is set the intention that this chakra, my throat chakra, is going to spin. But that is very likely involved with some childhood trauma where you were told not to speak or you were told not to show up. And so, yeah.
Thank you. So for those entrepreneurs that are suffering from a similar type of repressed emotion, do you recommend that they go through the process that you've just said? And is there anything else that they can do in order to reduce the impact of those repressed emotions in terms of that showing up as stress, as illness in different parts of their body?
Right. It's going to be different for everyone, what works well for them. But seeing someone, a Reiki master or an energy healer, someone who can help you through that process, especially someone who can see energy and truly determine, like I am claircognizant, so I just know things. And so it just shows up to me that this is something from your childhood. And using an energy healer to help you move that energy would make a tremendous difference.
Thank you. What other steps can entrepreneurs take in order to relieve those repressed emotions, perhaps by themselves, so they can start relieving that illness and stop the cycle of generational trauma?
So what I'm going to recommend is reading my children's books. Even though they're written for 8 to 14-year-olds, I have many reviews from people between 40 and 80 years old who say, God, I wish I had this when I was young. And as you read my books, you'll learn about feelings. You'll learn many different ways to process feelings in what I call positive expression of emotions. It's you could go to my website, you could watch Children's Lives Matter, or you could read my books, and you're going to get information that you never heard of before.
Thank you. Tell us more about what other kind of strategies there are for entrepreneurs to start seeing that their lives kind of start to make a big shift because of relieving these repressed emotions.
Well, one of the byproducts of repressed emotions is having a sense of low self-worth, or that you're not good enough to do what you do. And self-trust is, for me, it was the thing that made the difference in my being successful. So truly learning to value who you are as a person and trust who you are as a person, because you were you're a soul that came to this earth to be born, and your soul has a mission. And we as humans, we try and like fill this mission. And that's where the problem is when we try, because when we let go and allow our soul to come through and our soul to speak, the human doesn't have to try at all.
Thank you. So how can this become possible for someone? What do they have to do differently that they're not doing right now?
It depends on who the person is and what they're doing. But I would say in general, that I have a self-love journal that's on Amazon that I wrote that can help you over a course of 90 days to reach that point of self-trust and self-love. But it's going to be different for everyone. It might be meditation. It might be choosing yourself first, which especially for women is a hard choice to make. And that decision that I made way back in 2018 to choose my needs first. And that has been one of the ways that I've been able to achieve what I've achieved.
Thank you. What other strategies are there for healing the repressed emotions?
So, yeah, I would say the most important one is to the focused attention, because allowing the feelings to flow, that can be used on old feelings. So if you picture a situation that happened, you can use the focused attention, or you can use the timeline adjustment, which is where the adult you shows up. Either one can help move that old energy.
Okay. So, I have a lot of traumatic experiences from childhood. For example, my grandma used to beat me every day, and she used to say that I was stupid, ugly, and fat. And then I also observed my mom being beaten by her boyfriend, and just felt kind of helpless in the process.
Yeah, you were raised amongst violence, but you were innocent at the time. I mean, you still are, but
Yeah. And I also felt really helpless, and at the same time, my grandma used to be really cruel. So she used to like put me to sit on walnut shells for taking a flower from the garden.
Oh my!
And she would throw like wooden logs at my face from far away. For not washing the dishes well without soap, because it had to be without soap. Or she would like smash my head against the walls for not finding a needle in a where it was meant to be. So I grew up really terrified. So I wonder, knowing this, how would you guide someone like me to kind of go back to those situations to kind of like make peace with them, so that, let's say now when I'm organizing a big event, I would feel empowered rather than disempowered running those events?
It's very disempowering to be treated in that manner. And I am just so sorry you had to experience that. But I also know that the strongest, the oldest souls choose the worst situations to be born in, so that they can gather the information that they need in order to fulfill their soul mission. What I can say about your grandmother is that hurt people, so my father was very abusive. And when I was an adult, my aunt told me, oh, she just made like, it was this little side comment. Oh, Jimmy, he was such a sensitive child. And I was blown away. I was like, no, that monster in my house was not ever sensitive. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, okay, so in 1925, he was a sensitive boy, which was probably seen as effeminate and not acceptable in society. So he had his mother and his father on him for being sensitive, telling him to be a man, shut up those emotions, shut them off, don't be that way. And he learned to not like himself. So he escaped to using alcohol, except when he used alcohol, he would fulfill that not liking himself by the way he treated his family. So it was like keeping that feeling flowing. With your grandmother, she probably had a very traumatic childhood, and she was acting out what she knew, but she was also projecting her inner turmoil onto you. And using that that timeline situation where you go back in as an adult can be very freeing for you. You might have to do it for the situation with the walnuts. You might have to do it for the situation with the dishes, and another time, for another with the logs. But if you do that work, the energy starts flowing. And especially if you can acknowledge to that little child it's okay for you to feel sad about this. It's okay for you to feel bad about this. It's okay for you to hate her. It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay that what happened is okay, but it's okay for you, the child, to feel that way.
Thank you. So, it's quite interesting that, she died. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She died like a few years ago, and I don't hate her anymore. And I would say that I forgave her a few years before she died. But what I found is that I now have a very different perspective on that experience, which is that she did me such a massive favor, because if she hadn't beaten me, I would have perhaps still been in Romania in a small town and never amounted to much. And I think that also because she had a very perfectionist mindset all around, 9.81 out of 10 is not good enough. You have to get 10. Why didn't you get 10? So having that perfectionist mindset kind of got me out of there, trying to escape. But still, you can say to some extent, I'm continuing that generational thing where I'm a perfectionist now. And I want to impact 100 million people to be happier, to go after what they want, to share their stories, and to impact the world, and to create wealth through these books that transform the world. And I think that if I wasn't so hurt, maybe I would never have thought of that. Maybe I would be like a small town girl in Romania. But coming back to the story of repressed emotions, what if these repressed emotions are somehow linked with not being good enough? What would you suggest for entrepreneurs to do so they can overcome that feeling of not being good enough?
So I worked with Dr. Donald Epstein, who is a very well-known, he works on Tony Robbins, and he's well known for creating network spinal analysis. And that's another way that you can get some of those emotions to flow, is through network spinal analysis, because it's somatic. It's about the body and the spirit. And so I was writing this article with Donnie, and his whole premise is, you're not enough. Accept it. And I had to wrap my head around that, because, all of personal development is about, hey, you are enough. You're here. You've got a job to do. Get to it. But if we are truly our soul, we're the human part of our soul, and we're only this tiny little bit of all the energy of our soul. We are not enough to do our soul's mission, but our soul is. And accepting that it's okay to be not enough, because that means you're giving the reins to your soul. That's a good thing.
Thank you. What kind of techniques did you use personally to kind of overcome some of your personal
my trauma? So I first went to an energy healer. I did somatic movement the energy healer, she was very interesting because she would have me like, she would be moving energy and she'd say, there, now feel that. And I'd have to like be with that painful feeling for a little bit. And that was, I think, the precursor to the formula that came to me of focused attention. But somatic work, I've had many, many, many network spinal adjustments. And I took an alchemy course, which was called Mastering Alchemy. And it was using how to move energy to let go of old trauma. Because, you know, if, for instance, you were in an accident and a blue car hit you, then every time you see a blue car, you might have a little trigger trauma about blue cars. But it's not about the blue car. It's about the driver who hit you, who is driving. And so learning to let go of those trigger things and, you know, say, it's okay if I see a blue car.
How do you let go? What do you do?
Well, there's Mastering Alchemy is a 3-year program. And I can't gel 3 years into one thing. But one of the ways in that program is to create thought strings where you create triangles and you write words in the triangles and connect them to other triangles with words. And it's flowing, you know, how do I want to be in the world? I want to be authentic. I want to be loving. I want to be helpful, in service. And so that would be a triangle on my page. And then what you're doing is really shifting energy and working out. But because I did that 4 years ago, I can't really explain the process very easily. But anyone can find Mastering Alchemy online if they are a soul that wishes to experience that. But having experienced network spinal, after I learned Mastering Alchemy, I can say, if I was going to choose one way to move that trauma, I would do it through network spinal because it's very effective.
Tell us how it works.
So with the network spinal, it's a kind of chiropractic, except it's a very soft touch. So they scan your spinal cord and they look at just where it feels crunchy or where it feels like there's stuck energy. And they will gently touch that and reach up. And I don't know, because I'm not trained. They're reaching into, you know, the good energy, basically, and bringing it down into that space. My husband, Dr. Richard Kay, was a network spinal chiropractor for 30 years. He can be able to talk about that much better than I.
Thank you. Is there any particular protocol that you have that enables people to overcome these repressed emotions?
Well, the two that I've taught already are deceptively simple, but very profound when you use them. I was on a podcast with Vince Warnock in Australia, and he told me after the podcast that he had lost his best friend or a friend to suicide the day before the podcast. And when I taught the focused attention, he started using it. And he said it was able to get him through a time that he didn't think he could get through.
Wow, that is fascinating. So tell us about why you started the Children's Lives Matter and the book series for children.
It's because of kids like you. Because I had a traumatic childhood. You had a traumatic childhood. We both chose to do something different and not take those lessons and put them onto our kids. So we chose to break that cycle of trauma. But there's a lot of people who they just don't know. And so they don't make that choice. So that trauma cycle continues and it continues. And when you think of how many people go to the pub every day in England, that's part of that trauma cycle.
Thank you. How do you coach entrepreneurs to deal with, let's say, once they are kind of like working towards overcoming those repressed emotions, how do they deal with the people around them? Because, for example, I find, my mom is one of the most incredible titans in the world. What I mean by titans is I find that she doesn't even know her power. She's like just really a tremendous, very resilient woman. But I find that she's very perfectionist to the point that, let's say, even now, if I was to do something 99%, she would still find the 1% to complain about. So I wonder what do you suggest entrepreneurs do to kind of cope with the negativity, the criticism, you're not enough people around them?
So understanding that in the Talmud, it says, we do not see the world as it is, we see it as we are, but not about you, but about the people around you. So you can look at your mom and you can say, she is the product of her mother, who is the product of her mother, who is, I don't know how far back that generational trauma goes, but you can see the line is perfectionism all the way through. And so that is the thing. So with perfectionism, it is a part of someone who feels not enough, trying to prove to the world that they are enough. But you don't have to prove to the world, because you are made to be who you are. And you don't have to prove to the world. You just have to be authentically you. So when you find yourself stepping into that perfectionism, take a breath and give yourself grace, because you are just staying in that behavior pattern. When you recognize, so it's the recognizing the behavior pattern that is the first and most important step. Once you recognize it, when you notice it coming up, choose something else. We all have that choice.
Thank you. And what I mean is, like, how do you suggest entrepreneurs cope with the negativity around them?
Okay. Everybody is on a soul path. Everybody is raising in frequency. And not everybody can be as high frequency as you are, or as high frequency as I am. So when you are in unity consciousness, when you understand that you are nothing, part of everything, then you can say, there's a young soul, and that young soul hasn't had enough lives on earth to truly learn enough lessons to reach the level of consciousness I have. And so you look at them with compassion rather than resistance.
That's interesting. It is kind of a very similar view to what I've had about other people, but not about my mother, for example, because I find that some people actually are so good and they don't even know it. That's what I find quite fascinating. Do you also find that?
I don't. I am surrounded by some really wonderful, beautiful people. And well, no, I take that back. Yeah, my new stepson doesn't know how good he is. So there you go. But in terms of, so I didn't talk about the wildfire in Northern California. I didn't talk about leaving a long-term marriage that was very toxic, but both happened. And once I left the marriage, I learned about soul contracts. I was, scrolling the web, and I found a blog that talked about soul contracts. And it occurred to me that my father and my ex-husband, who are both very injured men, their souls were whole, but they were experiencing life as an injured man. And that can't be easy for a soul when, souls are all good. So when a soul is experiencing life as your mother or your grandmother, and they are causing pain to someone else, the amount of hurt that brings the soul is huge. And so for me, it was like I saw my ex-husband, my former husband, and myself in heaven and making this agreement where he would be the guy with the narcissist tool set and I would be the victim. And can I say which soul had a harder role there? I can't, because it's hard on both souls.
Thank you. When you find that you are surrounded by people who continuously hurt you, and you can try to look at them as, they're not as developed as I am, or I don't know, but it still hurts what they do because it's like you care about them. What do you do there?
So it's really hard sometimes, but sometimes you have to just cut off communication with that person. With my former husband, I have not spoken to him in 6 years. And it's not because I wouldn't speak to him, but in the beginning, I needed to cut that communication off because he was so damaging to my self-esteem. And he just hasn't reached out since. So, it's different with a parent, but setting boundaries with the parent. When we visit our families, we tend to drop into the old roles of childhood. And so just being aware of that and stepping back into your adult self and saying, it's not okay to talk to me that way. I won't accept that. And whatever the consequences of standing your ground, accept them, because she might say, then you can't even come here. I don't want to see you again. When there's a cutoff and it's not your choice, but the other person's choice, then the pain, you will feel pain over it because it's a loss of this relationship. But the relationship itself was something that brought you to the point of learning where you are now, and does continued exposure to that serve you?
Thank you. What about in cases where your repressed emotions are causing pain to another person? So let's say you haven't healed something, and because of that, you're acting in a certain way, perhaps procrastinating or not doing stuff that you're supposed to be doing,
or even attacking. That's definitely one of the outcomes of repressed emotions. So
have that hurt that you're causing on other people, and you're not intending to do it, but you simply don't know how to heal yourself. What do you do there?
In that case, the intention to figure out how to break this cycle, because what these all are apps that we play. And this comes from Donnie Epstein. We get stuck in the matrix of these apps and roll them around and play them. And once we get aware that we're playing that app, then we can take steps to get out of it. And it can change instantly. And I'm sorry, I lost the...
Yeah, so I was saying that, for example, when, let's say...
when you're hurting someone inadvertently.
Yeah.
Understand that we are all responsible for how we feel. We are not responsible for how other people feel. So if our behavior is triggering someone else, then they have repressed emotions that are responsive to that trigger. So if we were working on a summit together or something, and you were procrastinating, it wouldn't trigger me. I would just say, Lily, can we have a chat? Let's talk about this. How can together we get through this? And we would work it out together. But if I was someone who had been hurt by someone procrastinating before, then I'm going to be triggered by that behavior.
Yeah.
So all you're doing really is being a mirror, showing them their internal wounding.
So complicated. Thank you so much for this amazing show. Tell us, please, where entrepreneurs can find you.
AngelaLegh.com. It's AngelaLegh.com.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential business titans, providing you with the insights to awaken to your full potential so you can get paid to be yourself, find true happiness, and manifest anything you desire.